You probably used a modal before to zoom in on pictures. But what if you want a direct link to the image later on? That's where intercepting routes come in. With intercepting routes, you can get a direct URL to a modal pop-up that is shareable. If someone clicks the item to open the modal, you can see the URL change. If you then navigate directly to that URL, you'll see the original content without the modal. If you want the final code, check out the GitHub repository in the description below. Let's get started. So step 1 is setting up the project. Before we get started with the resume page, create a Next.js app with the app router. If you head over to the Next.js documentation, you can find the command for installing the app. Make sure to include Tailwind and TypeScript for styling and type safety. The first thing we're going to do is create a resume page. I've opened up the Next.js project I just created in my Visual Studio Code editor. In Next.js projects that use the app router, each route corresponds to a folder in the app directory. We'll create a resume page by adding a resume folder, which maps to the resume route. I'm going to paste a card representing a portfolio project onto the resume page. When you start your development server and visit the resume path, you should see the project card. Next, we're going to create a modal using parallel routes. You can use a parallel route to introduce a UI region or slot into an app where your modal can live. To learn more, check out the Next.js documentation on parallel routes. Let's see how it works in our app. To start, create a layout file inside your resume folder. Inside the file, we're going to define a slot for the modal using layout props. The props tell Next.js that there are 2 UI regions that we want to fill, the modal and the remaining content on the page via the children prop. Next, we're going to create a modal subfolder within the resume folder to fill the slot we created. The name of the subfolder should match the prop name. The modal segment won't be part of the URL path that you visit, but Next.js will place its content inside the modal slot we defined in layout file. When you visit the resume page, you should see the modal slot rendered below the main page content, since that's how we defined the layout file. You can then use styling to make the modal appear as an overlay on top of the main page content. This is what you should see when you visit the resume page. Next, we need a way to trigger the modal. Currently, the modal renders whenever we are on the resume page, but we want to have the modal appear only when a user clicks on the sample, otherwise we want it hidden. That's where intercepted routes come in. We can have the modal slot empty by default. Then, when a user clicks on the sample, we can navigate them to a new route, which Next.js will intercept and load inside the modal slot instead of as a full page. Let's see this in action. First, update the modal slot to return null. You shouldn't have the modal overlay anymore when you visit the resume page. Then, create the new route, sample, that loads inside the modal slot. The parentheses denote the intercepted route. Next, add the modal overlay to the page you just created. Next.js can intercept the route from any child or nested page within the resume folder, since the layout file that declared the modal lives there. In your resume page, update the Learn More link to direct users to the route for the modal overlay, which is sample. Restart your dev server, and try clicking on the Learn More link on the resume page. When the modal is open, notice that the browser URL is sample, not resume sample. Even though the intercepted route file is nested inside the resume folder, it's not actually part of the resume route path. Intercepted routes use only the path after the parentheses in its folder structure, and don't include the path where it is rendered. To close out the modal, we're going to add a link to the modal overlay that will take you back to the resume page. So far, we have a modal pop-up, which is what we're aiming for. But notice how visiting a sample page directly, or refreshing the page when you're reading the modal, gives you a 404 error. That's because Next.js uses its default routing behavior when you visit a route directly, or refresh the page. There's no interception. We'll need to define a sample route in your app folder, which will render content when the sample route is not intercepted. First, create a new sample folder inside the app directory. Next, add full content for the sample to the sample file. Now when you visit the sample page directly in the browser, you should see content that Next.js loads as a full page. So far we've built a modal and triggered it with intercepted routes. We're going to want to add multiple samples on your resume page. Let's create a sample data file in the root directory with sample data for multiple samples. You can find the code for the sample data in the description below. We're going to import the sample data into your resume page and update the resume page to include all samples. Here's what you should see. Notice how we no longer want the learn more link to always point to the same sample route. We want the first sample to appear under a sample1 path, the second sample to appear under a sample2 path. We'll have to adjust our folder structure to account for this. But instead of creating a folder for each route, we can use a dynamic segment to represent a parameter. The dynamic segment captures the slug as a parameter, which it can use to access content for a particular sample. We're going to update the sample page to render sample-specific content based on the parameter. Restart the dev server. Now when you click on each sample, you should see info for the sample you clicked under its corresponding path. We'll also want the non-intercepted version of the route to point to the updated paths and load sample-specific content. Update your folder structure to include a dynamic segment for the non-intercepted route. Then update the sample page you just created to render sample-specific content based on the parameter. Try visiting sample-1 directly in the browser. You should see info for the first sample on full page load. Again, the full code can be found in the description below. If you found this helpful, hit like and subscribe for more Next.js tutorials.